Hi, friends. Welcome to the first episode of the Cannabis series. I have a special guest with me today, my dog Mochi. Okay, so in this video, I am going to help you overcome attachment to weed by helping you first see through the illusion of weed, and secondly, we're gonna address cravings. We're gonna understand why cravings happen and how to negate that, and we're gonna address whether weed affect your cognitive abilities, and we're going to talk about how to minimize withdrawals. So let's get it started. Basically, whether you want to quit weed, never smoke weed again, or find a balance with it, it's up to you, right? This decision is up to you. But my objective here is to help you be able to detach from it so you can either take a break from it or completely adios it. And if you are trying to find a balance with weed, you can ask yourself what kind of balance you want to have when you are super successful and super rich and just living your dream life, etc. And for me, this balance is that I only want to smoke weed once a week maximum. Like, I don't have to smoke every single week, but if I do decide to smoke weed or engage with weed, I only want to do it one time a week maximum. Okay, now let's talk about the illusion of weed. So the first thing we need to understand about weed is that weed holds a certain vibration, and by vibration I mean vibrational frequency, which is like a specific emotional state of being. And the state of being cannabis intoxication induces is, let's describe its characteristics. So the first characteristic is weed hinders your short-term memory. It kind of shuts down your short-term memory, it really limits your short-term memory. That in turn negatively affects your working memory. And how I perceive short-term memory and working memory is that it's kind of like we all have like a whiteboard in the back of our head, and on this whiteboard you can record information temporarily, aka short-term memory. And by recording information on it, you can kind of do some simple calculations or draw some connections and etc. to process the information. And that processing of information is working memory. When your short-term memory is affected, obviously your working memory is going to be affected as well. And when your working memory is affected, it's kind of like you lose access to that whiteboard in your head. And when you lose that whiteboard, of course, it's going to be harder to engage in higher level thinking and processing information, because you don't even have access to that whiteboard anymore. So that is what I think is really annoying, a really negative side effect of weed and weed intoxication. And another thing is that weed does or can narrow focus, but you also get attentional control issues when you're super high. And this attentional control issue can be described as if one moment I have a really great thought, right, or some idea, and the next moment I would kind of lose this train of thought because I won't be able to hold my attention on this thought. And then when I want to go back to that thought, I won't be able to remember it because of the short-term memory thing, and that's really frustrating. And also weed alters your time perception, so it's gonna be hard to tell whether you are spending too much time on a certain task or not when you're high, because it's hard to perceive time as that. And it's kind of, this effect kind of lingers, to be honest. You kind of just lose track of time, and you won't be able to sense the passing of time. And then the last but not least characteristic of weed that we're going to talk about is that you won't be 100% present in the physical world. That obviously creates a lot of problems. For example, it muddles your experiences, make it hazy, and you won't be able to catalog your memories as clearly as you would when you're sober. So this is basically the state of being weed intoxication induces. This state of being can have its healing spiritual properties, and we're gonna talk about it in upcoming videos. But a lot of precious moments, you want to be 100% present, and you want to be able to recall the memories as vividly as possible. For example, when you're hanging out with family, friends, loved ones, you want to be present and be there to experience that unconditional love. And a lot of people say that this specific state of being weed induces this specific vibration. It's not one of the very high vibrations. That means if you are currently super happy and elated, when you smoke weed, it's gonna actually bring you down. It's not gonna make you happy or high. And I totally agree with that. And I think people who smoke weed a lot also think so. If you know, you know. And so I think once I can see through this illusion, like once I can clearly define the state of being weed induces, I don't even want to smoke weed that often anymore, because it's just a state of being, and I have many other state of beings that might be more pleasurable, more pleasant to be in than this weed state. Yeah. And the second illusion weed casts on people is what I call the weed gray zone. Basically, it's where you only find weed related activities as fun and enjoyable, and anything that's non-weed related or doesn't have weed involved, you find it boring and dull, and this phenomenon actually is found and well characterized by a 2023 study, and this study basically is the final kick, is the final solidification of my detachment to weed, and I'm going to explain. So basically, the brain has regions that encode or calculates values of different rewards, and we kind of use that calculation to make decisions on what reward we want to choose. And let's call these areas of subjective valuation, or these areas that are responsible for neural encoding of subjective values, SV areas, or subjective value areas, because that's what the researchers used in this study. Okay, so basically the study found that in heavy weed smokers, defined by smoking more than 4 days a week, in these people, the SV areas have normal neural activities, or like would light up when presented with weed related rewards, but it didn't light up or didn't have normal activities when presented with non-drug rewards or snack rewards, because they used snacks as this non-drug rewards. So basically, my takeaway from this paper, especially when applied to our objective of overcoming weed addiction, is that we have to manually assign back the values of non-drug activities or rewards, like hanging out with family, friends, going out in nature, hobbies, creativity, and working out, etc. Like all these activities that you gotta manually, meaning you have to remind yourself consciously why these activities are enjoyable and fun, just as it is, like just as they are, and why you should cherish them and value them and be grateful for them, and also be present for them before I manually assign values back to these activities. The weed reward is kind of like up here, like in terms of my valuation, right? And other activities are like back here, because it's not because that weed is like just super high, it's because it decreased. Like these activities for me subjectively decrease in value, but now since I was able to like manually remind myself why I should enjoy these activities, now I'm able to bring it back up, and so weed is now just like among them and not even the highest valuation, And also, like, I manually assigned or labeled creativity and working out as my natural drugs. Like, I would just like remind myself, since I love drugs so much, since I love the altered state of consciousness so much, I would brainwash myself that creativity and working out are also altered states of consciousness, and they are far more enjoyable than actual drugs, because they bring me natural high. They make me naturally high on life, Yeah. Okay. And the third illusion that weed casted on me, at least, is the guilt / shame / self-esteem issues. So when I was in my addiction phase, subconsciously, even consciously, I was really worried and anxious and didn't really think of myself as worthy of success, because I have this bad habit or this drug use issue. And it kind of felt like it's morally wrong for me to be successful when I am engaging in this activity. Like this is like a lot of guilt and shame. But this simply is just not true, because a lot of conventionally successful people also have drug use problems. And that doesn't mean that we're glorifying drug use or we should use drugs, etc., etc. But I just think that approaching the drug use issues from the perspective of, whether I can succeed or not is not right. Drug use and self-actualization, I think, they are not mutually exclusive, but instead we should approach the situation from a place of, I want to take good care of my body, I want to love my body because I am a divine being, my body is a divine vessel, and so I should love myself, like from this perspective, instead of from a perspective of, if I don't give up drugs, I won't be successful, because that's simply just not true. And I think it's just gonna bring more stress and anxiety to people. So I don't think that's like a helpful perspective to adopt. Okay, so that's basically the 3 things that we need to understand about weed. And hopefully now that we can see through what the effect of weed is, we can get out of this attachment. Because like once I can see the effects of weed clearly and the state of being it induces, I don't even want to smoke it that often anymore now, because it's like, what's the point? I know that when I smoke it, it's just going to bring me into that state of being. And that state of being is not going to be the optimal state of being to be in most of the time, or at least in certain situations. Okay, now let's move on to cravings. So the way the reward circuitry in our brain works is that the more you seek out instant gratification, the more painful or unpleasant your subjective experience is going to be afterwards, because of the pain-pleasure balance. Because the reward circuitry in our brain wants balance, like every pleasurable event at first is going to be balanced by a dopamine deficit state, which is like a kind of like a painful state in the opposite and equal amount at first. But as you constantly pursue the same or similar stimuli or pleasure, it's going to lead to shorter and weaker pleasure peak or dopamine peak at first, and longer and more or deeper dopamine deficit state at the end. And for both phenomena, the reverse is true too, meaning if you pay for your pleasure in terms of pain, aka hard work, efforts, the more you do that, the less painful the the dopamine deficit state is going to be, and shorter in duration of time, and the longer and more intense pleasure you're gonna get afterwards. And this is why like creativity and working out, like I said before, are actually really good natural drugs. You put in a lot of hard work and effort into creating stuff, and then once your creation is out there, you feel a lot of fulfillment from that, you know? Yeah, and working out is the same too. So cravings is caused by like anything that triggers you wanting to get weed. For example, you saw like a picture of weed or something, and then that would trigger a small amount of dopamine release in your brain, because that dopamine is what is going to motivate you into getting this reward or this pleasurable thing. But when you don't get it, the small dopamine peak is counterbalanced by like a small dip, right? Like the dopamine deficit state. And that dopamine deficit state is basically where you get your cravings. Like, because if you don't get it, it's kind of like, it's like uncomfortable. It's like physically uncomfy and like painful, right? But like if you can get hold of that, it's going to go away. And how you get hold of that, like from my experience, is you literally like don't focus too much on it, or you channel that into seeking out pain, like creating, manifesting your goals. Like focus on creation and manifesting your goals. And just know that when you're able to like not get weed and instead jump right into your creativity or your manifestations, this painful, uncomfortable feeling is gonna go away in no time. And aside from that, when you get cravings, also like ask yourself, what emotions or feelings are you trying to avoid? Because a lot of times my cravings are not triggered by some visual stimuli. It's usually triggered by some emotional response within me. Like, for example, I suddenly feel not motivated, suddenly feel frustrated, suddenly feel sad, suddenly feel bored, etc. Like, I've used cannabis to mask a lot of different emotions. But what I've noticed is that using drugs to mask emotions as a coping mechanisms, or like as a way to escape reality, will not solve my problems in the long run. And like it's not going to make me happy at all, like in the long term. Not even in the long term, just after this effect wears off, the problem is still there. So it's better off facing the obstacles and overcoming that challenge. And when I am able to do that, and every time I'm able to do that, you know, like when you're able to put in the hard work and time and effort, you're gonna be able to conquer your obstacles. And that feeling is super rewarding. That is literally like paying for your pleasure up front with the experience of pain. Yeah. Yes, okay. So to summarize, the feeling of cravings has its underlying neurological mechanisms, but by understanding how this reward circuitry and like this neurological mechanisms work, you can hijack the system and override these cravings by like either seeking out more pain. Instead of smoking weed, you go create, or you go focus on manifesting your goals, or literally examine why you want to do that and solve that problem, you know? Now let's move on to, does weed negatively affect your cognitive abilities? This was my biggest concern when I was in the midst of my addiction phase, and now I have an answer because now I'm out of that phase and I can see things from a better perspective, I guess. So the answer is yes. And how does it affect your cognitive abilities? It is through the intoxication effect of weed. Like we described earlier, the intoxication state affects your short-term memory, your attentional control, and time perception, etc., etc. And honestly, like I think it is through the shutting down of part of the thinking brain that weed reaches its effect of making people become more empathetic, more feeling-based. Because now we're interacting with the world in that lens because we don't have access to the higher thinking part of the brain, right? But how it negatively affects cognitive abilities is first through subacute intoxication, meaning weed takes longer period of time to leave your body, leave your system. And so like even if you like stop smoking, this effect's probably gonna linger on like for a few days. And for me, that's 1 to 2 days, but I do have pretty fast metabolism, so like I can still feel the effect of weed the next day, usually, but not the day after, because our brain is highly malleable, aka neuroplasticity. If you are always in the state of cannabis intoxication, then of course it's gonna change your brain accordingly, because you're always in that state. If you're constantly in that state, then your brain's gonna like slowly mold to that state or conforms to that state. So yeah, basically, what you engage in the most is going to affect your brain the most, But for my heavy weed smokers out there, don't panic, because both from the observation of my personal experience and from research studies, the negative effect of weed, like this intoxication effect, does fade with abstinence. Like when you stop doing it, it's your cognitive ability is going to come back. But like I said, because of neuroplasticity, the activities you engage in the most is going to change your brain. Like for example, for me, even though I can feel the negative effect of weed fading away in like 2 days, sometimes I feel like my short-term memory and my communication skills are not as good as before I started smoking weed, maybe. And it's especially with like my recall. Like sometimes I would glitch and can't recall the exact word I want to say, even I had already thought of the word in my head beforehand. And so I think it really is about the recall, like, because maybe recall is like I recall something and then I put it on this whiteboard, this short-term memory, and then when it's time for me to say it, like I can just grab it from the whiteboard. But now like the whiteboard is kind of limited, like that's how I kind of mentally conceptualize this. But again, neuroplasticity, whatever area that weed has kind of negatively impacted, just put in more effort and hard work into strengthening that area. Like for example, right now through this YouTube channel, I am practicing extemporaneous speaking. And if you're wondering, okay, Christine, like if weed brings such negative effects to your life, especially your cognitive abilities, why are you still smoking it? The reason is because it does have its spiritual healing properties, like I said before. It is through this effect that we reach this spiritual healing property. But because we have this cost of cognitive abilities, it's really important to not overindulge in it, because when you do that, yeah, it's going to affect your cognitive abilities. But I think if we can find a balance of it, then it shouldn't be like a big problem. That's at least my opinion. And I'm going to test it out with my life. So hopefully I'm right, okay? But honestly though, like since weed has already awakened me to my spirituality so much, and we also have other really good tools to enhance our spirituality, like meditation, journaling, I can really foresee myself completely cutting off weed. But I want it to happen naturally, like I kind of don't want to make myself really uncomfortable, hence the maximum 1 time a week thing. Because from my observation, the negative effect does fade away within 2 days for me. Like after 2 days, I would feel like my cognitive abilities are mostly restored, and so I'm not like super worried. But maybe I should, because I really value my brain. I love my brain. Okay, anyways, and now let's talk about how to minimize withdrawals. So this is from the observation of the few times of the multi-month breaks I took from weed. I experienced none to very little withdrawals from these few breaks that I took, because I never focused too much on the negative symptoms. Like for example, if I wake up a little bit fatigued or like frustrated, basically I won't tune in to this state, to this emotion. I won't be like, wow, I feel so frustrated because of weed, or wow, I feel so tired, I feel so fatigued, I feel this and that, like I feel so discomfort. Like I try not to tune into it, because I think you guys already know how much emphasis I place on mindset, and this is true with the withdrawals too. I think if you place too much attention and focus on negative symptoms, it's going to expand and manifest to even more severe symptoms. But honestly, like I also think the guilt and shame from overindulging from your subconscious mind can manifest as severe withdrawals, and that can be beneficial too, because sometimes you need these really bad experiences for you to learn your lessons and stop abusing it again. But essentially, if you want to minimize withdrawals, try not to focus too much on it. Even if sometimes you feel that like the negative symptoms, just try not to focus your attention on it. Okay, and finally, this is the conclusion of this video. Like, you guys have no idea how many times I filmed this. Literally, I filmed this video over like the duration of 3 days, from Saturday, Sunday, and now it's already Monday. But yeah, I tried my best. At least I conquered the obstacles, so I feel good. I'm paying for the pleasure I get from this project ahead of time with this painful experience. Okay, anyways, now let's end this video with a few higher level conclusions. So first, remember that smoking is bad for your health. If you want to engage with weed, I would say try edibles, even though I might even have a hard time adopting that because I really like the effect of smoked cannabis. And secondly is that too much cannabis, regardless of your method of administration, will lead to fatigue and brain fog. Yeah, like it's going to make you less energetic, like if you take too much. And also, the third thing is that when you feel attached to it, it takes up a lot of mental energy and space and time, because you're always thinking about, oh, I want to smoke weed. Oh, like, should I smoke weed? Oh no, I shouldn't smoke weed. Like, like it's always in the back of your head, which is going to be really annoying. Basically, I think anything you engage in life should be an empowering experience. Like, for example, like aside from drugs, sugary stuff, you can have an ice cream when you go out with friends on the beach. That's going to be really rewarding and empowering, and you will feel nurtured from it. But if you constantly and overindulge in it, this thing has become a bad thing in your life. Like sugar itself has become a bad thing. So I think finding a balance is really important, and don't let weed, the substance, stop you from living your dream life, because that is ultimately what's going to bring you true happiness and ultimate fulfillment. And people say that the first day is going to be the hardest, but I just focus on my creativity, creating and manifesting my goals, and I don't pay too much attention to weed or its withdrawals. So it's more like my first day of quitting in multi-month breaks for me. It's more of like a normal day that I just choose to be productive and not to engage with drugs or an altered state of consciousness. And I hope everything I've shared in this video can help you guys also reach this state of detachment. And what you choose to do from there is your choice. But whatever you do, know that you are worthy of your fulfillment. You are worthy of your dreams. You are worthy to become your dream self. That's literally what we came here to do, okay? Yeah, love you guys, and good luck on your weed journey. I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Mwah. Yeah. And the third, regardless of what's it called? Ingestion, registration, administration. Regardless of your method of administration,